Look all around the world at the state of our society and climate. Superstorms like Harvey and Irma crashed into Texas and Florida, smashing rainfall and wind records, and a large 8.1 earthquake in Mexico caused devastating damage. For more than 10 years, our planet's climate has been changing at an alarming rate when compared to geologic records, with increased superstorms, earthquake, and volcanoes worldwide. At the same time, the media focuses our attention away from all of this, towards celebrities, icons, and war to divert from the truth. So what really is the truth? As tides around the globe begin receding at a shocking rate, as seen in Florida, Brazil, and Egypt, and large earthquakes and volcanoes increase, we all deserve to know what's really happening, and if an outside force is actually to blame for all of this. We must not shy away from this information any longer, for a time of great change is upon us that has been written about for thousands of years. To understand what's happening, we must first go back to the earliest developed human civilization on Earth, known as the Sumerians, in what's today known as Iraq. The Sumerians represent the first civilization to develop advanced writing techniques, as well as tracking events and chronicling our ancient history. The Sumerians claimed that their knowledge of the stars, writing, agriculture, and social structures were all lowered from heaven by great gods who came from a planet with a long elliptical orbit known as Planet X, or Nibiru, meaning the crossing. The name Nibiru is derived from the unusual elliptical orbit that the planet follows, which takes it through our central solar system every 3,600 years. The Sumerians left behind records indicating the existence of this planet in cuneiform writings and cylinder seals. The most famous of these is known as VA-243, which shows a scale model of our solar system, which includes our central sun and the planets that revolve around it, including Planet X, where they claim their gods came from. Today, most of society has been tricked into believing these gods in Planet X are nothing more than a myth and fairy tale to hide the truth with laughter and ridicule. This clever tactic has hidden the real version of history and our origins for generations, until over time it has been nearly lost forever. It's time for humanity to awaken from its amnesia of all of this happened before us. The Sumerians called their gods the Anunnaki, which meant those who from heaven to earth came. The Sumerians wrote in detail about both who the Anunnaki were and the events that led to their arrival on Earth hundreds of thousands of years ago from Planet X. In these early cuneiform writings, such as the Atrahasis, we learn about two brothers known as Enki and Enlil, who bitterly fight over the direction of humanity, and provides details of the disasters caused by the crossing of Planet X. Much of the turmoil revolves around these two rival families and how this mysterious planet has shaped our story. Enki was a brilliant scientist and was known as the great magician and geneticist of the Anunnaki family. His symbol was represented as a dragon and serpent, and was shown through the modern medical caduceus symbol. The name En means Lord, with Ki being the original name of our planet before it was called Earth, which was later renamed for this great being Ea, a previous name of Enki. Enki's half-brother Enlil, known as the Lord of the Air or Sky, and represented by the eagle and bull, was a polar opposite of his brother. His values revolved around a military and highly disciplined mentality, whose interests solely lie in the preservation and future of the Empire of Anu. All of the Anunnaki are named after this king of the gods, who believes that he rules over Earth. The oldest and most important of these Sumerian writings is known as the Enuma Elish, which is a cuneiform tablet that speaks about our origin story and the devastation in our solar system long ago in the past. Found in 1849 in what is now the area of Mosul, Iraq, the Enuma Elish may be one of the most important pieces of writing in human history, for the unaltered and extensive information given for the events of the ancient past. The Enuma Elish contains 7 tablets, with the first 5 describing the turbulent celestial events that happened long ago when these Anunnaki royal gods acted out roles as the planets of our solar system, like a grand play, with Marduk being represented as the planet X, known to the Sumerians as Nibiru, with Enlil represented as Jupiter. Reading from an excerpt from Tablet 6 of the Enuma Elish, it states, "They bound him, holding him before Enki. They inflicted the penalty on him and severed his blood vessels. From his blood, he, Enki, created mankind. on whom he imposed the service of the gods and set the gods free. After the wise Enki had created mankind and had imposed the service of the gods upon them, the task is beyond comprehension. The gods were then divided, all of the Anunnaki into upper and lower groups. He assigned 300 in the heavens to guard the decrees of Anu, and appointed them as guard. Enlil has always hated humanity and called them the beasts, referencing their primitive nature and compared to their DNA. These brothers were given ownership and responsibility over planet Earth and deemed themselves gods of everything beneath them. Most of our story, and the extensive conflict throughout humanity, all stems from the jealousy that arose between Enlil and his sons over the gifts within the human genome that were instilled secretly by using Enki's own DNA himself. We learned in the Enuma Elish in Atrahasis that the Anunnaki created humanity to ease the workload of the Igigi, the workforce of the royal family, and to jumpstart the genetics of the Neanderthal with their own DNA to toil in the Absu, which we know is South Africa. Today, thousands if not millions of ancient mining sites, dating to over 100,000 years old, utilizing advanced smelting techniques, have been found all over the region. This is the ancient reason why we still value gold nearly above all else, and is part of our long history of slavery on the planet. We are now just waking up to the truth of all of this. The original purpose behind the creation of Homo sapiens, through the eyes of Enlil, was to become a simple slave race, with only enough intelligence to comprehend basic orders. Even the idea of giving humans more intelligence through splicing their own Anunnaki DNA greatly angered Enlil, and he fiercely opposed it. Unbeknownst to Enlil, his half-brother Enki ended up secretly designing a model of Homo sapien that was far too intelligent and possessed large amounts of Anunnaki DNA that could even rival their greatness as a species. Enki felt great responsibility and compassion for his creation, and endowed Homo sapiens with an advanced brain and higher consciousness, with chakra centers of energy that could be manipulated from a distance in the future in case humanity became enslaved by ideas. When Enlil found out that Enki had given Homo sapiens the gifts of their intelligence and the right to free will through conscious expansion, he was furious and promised to enslave humanity forever and never allow them to know the truth of who they really are. Much of the current reality stems from the promise that has always been kept and is the purpose behind the inversion of so many meanings that lead back to the truth, such as the demonization of the snake, Enki's symbol. This realization of reality can be uncomfortable to accept, but necessary for growth and perspective. When Enlil was chosen to be the ruler of Earth, instead of his half-brother Enki, a promise that had been made for the ultimate slavery of humanity was orchestrated and carried out 12,800 years ago as the planet crossing, Planet X, approached perihelion and disaster occurred across the Earth, as told by Atrahasis, who was also known as Noah. This represented the great reset button of humanity, and just the calamity needed by Enlil to permanently enslave humanity by tricking them through the conditioning of certain ideas and laws, so that society would unknowingly give all of their energy away to these gods. The popular figure of the cross, represented by Planet X, meaning the crossing or the sacrifice on the crossing through Marduk's later trickery, was implemented into religion to become a massive control system of information in controlling the minds of all of society. A profound quote to explain this deception and control by Enlil, Ninurta, and Marduk on humanity comes from Barbara Marciniak, which states, "The ultimate tyranny in a society is not controlled by martial law, but controlled by the psychological manipulation of consciousness, through which reality is defined so that those who exist within it do not even realize they are in prison." Underground cities such as Derinkuyu, Turkey, provide startling evidence to show the immense work involved by past cultures to seek shelter during times of violent earth effects from Nibiru. These underground dwellings have been found all over the world and speak to a forgotten chapter of human history leading back to our current time today, where most of this isn't even believed or known by society to be real. In 1991, Dr. Robert Harrington, the chief astronomer of the US Naval Observatory, took an 8-inch telescope to the end of Black Birch, New Zealand, one of the few optimal viewing points on Earth, and discovered a large planetary body approaching our solar system. Dr. Harrington calculated this planetary body to be approaching from below the ecliptic at an angle of around 40 degrees. A year later, in 1992, NASA gave 2 press briefings where they prepared the public for disclosure of a new planet in the far outer reaches of our solar system they called Planet X. Millions followed the events, awaiting the spectacular announcement of a new planet, only to hear silence. Before Harrington could publish his findings, he mysteriously died of throat cancer, and his research was quickly debunked as simply mathematical inaccuracies. All information and stories about Planet X quickly disappeared, and most forgot it even existed. Today, the Vatican Observatory continuously monitors the heavens from multiple telescopes, awaiting the great return from heaven of the Anunnaki in Planet X. As we approach the fall of 2017, 3,600 years since the last crossing of Nibiru, the return and fulfilling of the prophecy of Revelation 12 seems imminent as events are unfolding across the world. As Planet X reaches perihelion near Earth, the changes we have been seeing will only increase in intensity. Great care must be followed by those living along coastal regions, especially those areas that are very low-lying and prone to flooding. Ocean levels will begin fluctuating dramatically during tidal phases, as well as increased earthquake and volcanic activity. Any large seismic activity could lead to a number of tsunamis along the coast and should be monitored closely. No matter what happens during this pass, records indicate it will not be anywhere near as destructive as the past 12,800 years ago, which led to the end of the Ice Age and the Great Deluge. The biggest impacts from Planet X are likely not going to come from environmental disruptions, but from sweeping change across our social, monetary, political, religious, and scientific understandings. Reality as we know it will change forever once intelligent life is finally announced to the public. All of the silly distractions and ignorance that has plagued our world will melt away with astonishment and wonder once major discoveries in archaeology are revealed that lie under the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Sphinx, known as the Halls of Amenti. Our understanding of who we are and our place within the multiverse is just beginning to be understood. This will be a time of weighing our consciousness and measuring our actions to reflect on what kind of being we are and how we can contribute to our timeline story. The Anunnaki gods follow the ancient rules laid down for the balancing of energy during zodiacal cycles. The time of Pisces featured a negative polarity, which is why we saw war dominate the planet for thousands of years. All of these changes represent the great metamorphosis of our time as we enter the positive polarity of Aquarius in the next several years to take the first step on our journey into the cosmos to join our galactic neighbors. What kind of society will we become? One focused on war and material gain by the eagle? Or higher consciousness in the lost teachings of the great dragon Enki?
Issues in my mind, especially the book of Genesis, and you're correct. The 12th planet was Sitchin's first book, and he did spend a lot of time showing you evidence, showing you evidence. Here's this tablet. Look at this one, and trying to make it. He was trying to justify this unbelievable theory that most of the scientific people and the academics were dissing him over, because he was like Wilhelm Reich. Or what was it? What's the guy's name who discovered Troy? I can't remember his name. He was a German, though. But, the same problem with him is the academics dissed him. And, so he was pretty much out on his own, with his own resources. And so I kind of saw that with Sitchin as well. And, Sitchin, he left himself open, I think, by writing The Lost Book of Enki and not giving any sources for it. I think it was a great book. And I think it wove together a lot of the pieces that he had from various sources to tell the big story, which he did very well. He was a great writer. But I never felt like I could reference that book without references, so I never really talk about that one. But the 12th planet really opened my eyes to the Sumerian documents. And I'd been looking for a culture that had the earliest writing, so I could kind of go back to the source and go, well, where did this technological chasm come between different civilizations? That's how I was approaching it. And then I read, I think, Genesis Revisited from him. And this really made me go back and read the Bible again closely. And I started seeing things from the perspective now, having read all the Sumerian documents, that made a lot more sense to me. And with that perspective, you could differentiate the truth from a lie a lot more readily. And so when you go back and read Genesis 1, and you see that that these gods, plural, created man in our image and our likeness, and then go read the Atrahasis account, where a council meeting of the Anunnaki specified exactly that, and I mean plural. There were 6 men and 6 women on this council. So, you start seeing those kind of correlations as well once you've read the Sumerian documents, which predated the Bible by a very long time. All of a sudden, you realize that what you have there that's called the Word of God isn't completely true. And there were political agendas in writing that book. If you truly understand the circumstances the Hebrew people were in as they were being held captive in Babylon, where they first saw these documents, these Sumerian documents. Okay, so what do we know? What is your specific question about the prehistory of Nibiru, this planet that they say they come from? And then we can kind of walk from there into the main players and who did what to whom and how we ended up where we are now. But kind of will give us a platform to maybe discuss a little more.
Great.
Correlations with how we go forward, because that's once you realize all this stuff, it takes a long time to process it. And some people years. Okay, this is like tearing out every belief system you have, and all of a sudden you're faced with this truth that's in stone, that's sitting up in museums, where you can either ignore it or synthesize it and realize what they were saying probably was not a lie, even though it was called a myth by by the conquering cultures, right?
Well, and here's one thing that I'd like to make a point. As far as different religions and cultures and beliefs, that's one of the amazing things about being a human being, is we have the right to think for ourselves and believe what we want to. So, whatever take or mindset you have on religion, divine providence, God, if you believe in multiple gods, if you're an atheist, whatever, this is tonight just an opportunity to hear about stuff that's been documented throughout history, and the translations that are discussed have, there's multiple sources that collaborate and say, yes, this is what happened. So whether or not you want to believe it or it's 100% accurate, that's up for debate, and that's fine for you to believe. But a lot of this information it's cutting edge, because this is stuff that's been suppressed for thousands of years. When the Crusades took place, and anything that wasn't a part of the system church at that time, was looked at as blasphemy, witchcraft, and people were burned at the stake. Libraries and tons of information was destroyed because of this. So a lot of this information and what you're talking about predates the books of the Bible. And that's just incredible. So I would like to talk about the 6 women and the 6 men that were part of it, and we'll get into some of the names and the correlations of the biblical references, maybe the Greek gods, and maybe even if they connect to the Vedic gods, Valhalla and some of the Nordics and stuff. But my question was about Nibiru. Is the official version that I know about of the Anunnaki when they came to Earth was to look for gold. Is that correct?
Well, that is correct. If we start back on the prehistory of Nibiru, there was a king that ends up as the main progenitor in the Anunnaki line that we like to include in the story, because he was head of the Anunnaki Council, and his name was Anu.
Okay, so Anu was the original king, or as far back as you can go, it was Anu.
Right, and we're circa 450,000 years ago right now, and according to their records, one of the beings who was the prior king, his name was Lama. Excuse me. He was discussing problems in their atmosphere, whether to bolster their atmosphere to protect themselves against radiation using the volcanoes to reactivate them by firing missiles into them, or to create a particulate solution to seed the atmosphere. And this was a discussion they were having way back then, because you have to understand, in the myths of Mesopotamia, there's a document in there called the Atrahasis, written by Stephanie Dalley. And the document is, the Enuma Elish. There's Atrahasis as well, but the Enuma Elish is the Babylonian or the Sumerian cosmogony. which essentially describes how our solar system came to be. And why it's important to them is because, according to the account, their planetary system, we call it the Nibiru constellation, all right? It looks like they have a mini sun and about 7 planets total. And each planet may have a couple of satellites.
Okay.
Well, anyway, this constellation somehow, according to their record, in this allegory of this epic battle in space with, think of the planets as billiard balls that are just flying around. Well, they somehow got trapped into our sun's orbit, in a retrograde orbit, according to them, that they weren't in before. And after the first time through, they described all the things they were doing at the inner planets to prepare themselves for shielding radiation, have to blow this up to get it out of the way, all these kind of things. And we didn't really understand it until we got a little more scientific, I think. They were talking about using weapons that could split an entire planet.
You know, and that reminds me of like a Type 2 civilization.
Right. So anyway, they had atmospheric problems without getting too lost there. They're in a 3600 retrograde orbit, according to them. They kept time in that method in what was called a shar. Even the Sumerian kings list, their reigns were listed in shars. Okay, and if you read the Sumerian kings list that was given to us by Berossus, it shows the first one having a reign of 8 shars, which turns out to be 28,800 years. As unbelievable as that is, and we'll get to that. Okay, but keep that in mind. So they got trapped in this retrograde orbit. It gives them a platform, a moving platform, to see all the other planets that are already in this space. Well, they didn't get out that easily. They apparently had some collisions about the second time around their 3,600-year orbit, such that one of the satellites of Nibiru struck a planet that was in the place where the Earth is now. They called it Tiamat. It broke part of it off. Part of it became the Earth, and the other part became the asteroid belt. And at that point, one of the moons of Nibiru apparently got stuck in its orbit, and they called that one Kingu, which is our moon, which is unusually large for our planet, you have to admit. So anyway, so a lot of these stories they told in this Enuma Elish account, we're now verifying scientifically that what they said is true. And this document is quite old. So from there, they needed a solution, because if you imagine a planetary system coming into perihelion with the sun every 3,600 years, what it would do to your atmosphere. It'd probably strip it of various components that would normally be there, either through magnetic effects, through plasma discharge and radiating it, who knows, okay? But apparently they had this need to keep bolstering their atmosphere, which, and I think they knew in the long run it was a losing battle to continue to do this. They needed a long-term solution, and I think that's partly where the Earth came in their long-term plans. But anyway, they had an occlusion account in their Enuma Elish with the Earth, so they knew about it, and they called the planet Ki. Okay, and they counted from the outside in, from their perspective, since when they were out aphelion, they were the farthest planet out. So they counted inward, the planets inward, and that if you count that way, the Earth is number 7. That's why I named my second book The 7th Planet. Okay. So with this problem that they had, the king Anu decided to dispatch his chief scientist, who was called Enki. It was his firstborn son. He was sent to the Earth to do a couple of things. One of the primary things was to find resources to bolster the atmosphere back on Nibiru as they were coming into perihelion with the sun again. So some accounts show that he was looking in the Persian Gulf initially. That's where he splashed down and built the city of Eridu, which is right there where the Tigris and the Euphrates meet, running through the Sea of Reeds into the Persian Gulf. Okay, so that's, according to him, if he did that when he said he did it, that city's 450,000 years old, and it's still sitting there in the desert in Iraq, pretty much, I don't know, like a pile of rubble.
Jeez.
Anyway, so that's pretty amazing. So he came. Tried to get colloidal gold out of the oceans. Apparently, if it's already in a colloidal solution, or you can use chemicals to do it and derive it that way, you already got a powder-like form that you can ionize in the atmosphere. It's very simple. Whereas, if you take gold and have to smelt it somehow to get it to a powder form, or a form that could be sprayed, think about how you would do that. Would you just make it little tiny particles that you'd spray up there? It'd be too heavy. It would just fall out of the atmosphere, right? So that'd be very, very small particles. So that was about 450,000 years ago. So Enki Enki means Lord of the Earth, by the way. So his initial title was Lord of the Earth. His half-brother Enlil was still back on Nibiru, and he was born of his father Anu and his half-sister, Anu's half-sister, whose name was Arash. Her other name was Ki. She was nicknamed Ki, Arash. So she ended up giving birth to Enlil, and because she was a half-sister, and because of mitochondrial DNA contributions in the purity of their bloodline, he was in line to rule. Enki was not. So at this point, we're in the Persian Gulf, and Enki's trying to get gold. He brought a small band of workers with him, which he called the Igigi. They also referred to him in the Book of Enoch as the Watchers. These were highly technical fellow gods that generally ran spacecraft, low Earth drones, all kinds of technical things to watch the state of the simulator to report back to the higher-ups, okay, whether it was an asteroid coming in or too much radiation, just whatever, okay, that's partly why they were called the Watchers. So they were there to assist Enki in getting this gold from the Persian Gulf. Apparently they didn't get it fast enough. 5,000 years elapsed. They ended up being vectored to South Africa, where the Atrahasis document picks up. So at this point, apparently they weren't getting gold fast enough from the Persian Gulf, and they got vectored down to Africa, where they could mine it more significantly. This is where the Atrahasis picked up. And in the beginning of this first tablet of the Atrahasis, it describes them casting lots to divide up the territories between some of the key players that we should lay out here. We've already mentioned Anu and Enki. Enlil was the other one. The one we didn't mention was the half-sister to both of them, whose name was Nin Hartzog. And later on, we'll find out her name was Isis in Egypt. She was the medical officer that accompanied them. She was very important, because if one of them had a child with her, it would be in line to rule, because of this half-sister mitochondrial DNA thing. So she was kind of a key player for that reason as well. Okay. So they end up casting lots. Enki gets Africa. Anu goes back to Nibiru. Enlil gets Mesopotamia. And the exemption is that the temple of Eridu and the city that Enki built there with his original Igigi Watchers still belonged to him. And apparently he had a garden there, and he'd done all kinds of things in 5,000 years until his brother showed up. At this point, they've divided the territory. I left Inanna out. She got the Indus Valley. Okay, then Enki's in Africa. Oh, and the medical officer actually got some territory. Even though she was a medical officer, she got given the Bond Heaven Earth region up in the Sinai Peninsula that belonged to the Anunnaki. Now, this was the area where they had their, I guess you would call it, their communication facilities.
Okay.
And also transport facilities for moving the ore back to Nibiru, whether it went directly or via a way station.
I'm thinking of those in Peru or somewhere out there. They had those ginormous, like, landing pads and very big, kind of, I guess, sculptures of different animals and stuff like that. Was that done by the Anunnaki? Like, was that to give them an idea from space?
It very well could have. There have been several races, I believe, that have visited the Earth and done prospecting here. And I think there have been somewhat controversies between races of vying for those, resources from the Earth. So, resource wars and genetic wars, both. Excuse me. Okay, so let's go back to Africa. We've now got the main players. They've divided the territories. And these Igigi Watchers are signed up to come down to Africa and mine the gold manually versus this colloidal method they were originally planning to do from the ocean. Well, this is hard work.
Well, we don't get up till late because we're retired. At 9 o'clock I heard a knock on the door. It was a chap from next door. He was out watering his tomato plants, and he said, "Do you want the good news or the bad news?" I said,
"The good news is you got a swimming pool?"
Yeah, and he come out and got a hole in the ground,
Oh my goodness. It's hard to explain, a hole in the backyard. And as we've been out here watching it all morning, with their neighbours, it's got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think, when's it going to stop?
What it is old workings, old mine workings. We've identified the fact that there's a shaft put in here many, many years ago, and we've been in contact with the mines department. They're sending a team up here.
Summer, and there can't actually be snow somewhere in the United States. Can there? Yes, there can. Mauna Kea Observatory, that's over in Hawaii, of course, and as if it's not crazy enough that we have snow somewhere in the United States, how about the fact that...
Becky, because the weather woes never seem to end in this country for weeks, even months. People in this country have been really just praying for one thing, and that is for the monsoons to arrive, because after 2 years of drought, their farmland has been desecrated. There's been this heat wave that's been sweeping across the country, killing hundreds of people. And then now it's the monsoons that are killing people. As you mentioned, 90 people killed just in a matter of 24 hours, mainly in this one state of Bihar. Most of the people who died were farmers, because this is a time as the monsoons arrive when farmers are out planting.
Don't think you'll be disappointed with this. Not a spot on lens, not a spider. There's no legs with this. And they're on 4 cameras at the same time. And now we can see that it stayed in there for 1 hour, and then it bounces back. Again, it is in a orbit around Nibiru that looks appear to be coming and going. So it's going above and below the horizon as this thing is coming at us and away from us as it approaches us and then retreats as it goes around Nemesis. Next, I'm going to show you, please pay attention to the time here. This is the second at the same time. No, this is over Italy, and now we've got Switzerland at the same time. We've got the same object. And let me do the time lapse on this one. Yes. Look how big it's getting. You can start to make out the plasma tail. And the camera setting here looks like 400 ISO. Not quite visible with the naked eye. Look at that. That thing's just getting bigger. And you can almost make out the redness of this thing. Oh my gosh. I've never seen this thing so big. It's getting close. Wow. We continue running the time lapse here, and then it disappears, and it reappears again. Again, it's the shadow. It's still facing the northwest. The actual planet is in the north southeast.
What you see here, everybody, is a thing called sun calc. And what it does, what this program does, is it shows you where the sunrise and the sunset should be relative to your position. So in the example here, this is where I am right now, where this red dot is. This is where I'm located. And basically it's saying that the sunset should happen at this, or the sunrise should happen on the yellow line, and the sunset should happen on this red line. Okay? Now, here is the important thing that I want to bring up right away this morning. The North Star, first of all, was off by 3 to 5 degrees, as confirmed by about 30 subscribers over the weekend. So anybody that knows where the North Star should be based on fixed points on the ground, like me, my story was I go out and I've been checking the North Star's position for 3 years. It has not changed for 3 years, okay? It stays in the same place winter, spring, summer, and fall. It's always in the same place, okay? The way you can find the North Star is you take the two ends of the Big Dipper and draw a line. So our position, fixed position relative to the North Star right now is off by 3 to 5 degrees to the west, Wayne. Or to the east.
To the east.
Yes, in my observation, and I have a solid one, and then I've gotten confirmation from several different people. So what does this mean? Why is Steve so freaked out about the North Star? The reason Steve is freaked out about the North Star is it's the one fixed point that we all can, everybody in the Earth, can validate the North Star being in a position if they have two fixed points on the Earth. Okay? I have now enough information to tell you from astrophysicists, astronomers, and people that have given us feedback at WSO, they all tell me that we're correct, Wayne. That the North Star has moved 3 to 5 degrees to the east.
The implications of this, Steve, is, well, it's very disturbing.
Yes. The second point I wanted to bring up, and that's what the sun calc thing is for, is to say that you see that red line, Wayne, that points off at about rough. This is a rough 45 or just off 45 degree angle here. See that?
I see it, Steve.
From sunrise to sunset. So it is normal for us to see the sun setting in the northwest, and it's normal for us to see it rising in the northeast. First of all, that's not unusual for this time of year, you guys. Okay. What is unusual, though, and if you can you see my little hand?
Yes.
When I looked at the sunset for the last 2 nights, the sunset has been here, where my hand is. About 22 degrees, Wayne.
Which, by the way, Steve, as you know, when you called me on Saturday, and I immediately went in and checked my compasses, I registered and recorded the same anomaly, and here in the Denver area, we were off by about 22 to 27 degrees to the northwest, and it didn't change. In fact, Steve, I posted on my YouTube channel a recording of where I actually filmed the needle of the compass actually oscillating back and forth. And that was Saturday.
Yeah, and by the way, and I won't bore everybody with the data, because it is pretty boring data, but that has been confirmed by several as well that did, after we talked on Saturday, I reached out to a couple of the other subscribers, and they all confirmed they were also having the same magnetic anomaly.
I actually know a pilot friend who told us yesterday that he's a private pilot, that he can no longer rely on his compass. I said, well, how do you get from point A to point B? He says that they use a gyro software that is more directly linked to GPS as opposed to trying to follow magnetic north.
Yeah, let me, having been an ex-avionics guy, I can give you a little insight into that. There's a thing called a gyroscopic internal navigation system that yeah. So those systems don't even require GPS, by the way, Wayne.
Well, thank you. See, I'm a novice. I ride in them. I don't drive them.
Right. No, that's okay. It's a very strange thing that I'm an expert in it because the Air Force made me one.
Good.
So we used to navigate with our primary navigation before GPS came online was a thing called PAC-AN. The civilian world has a similar thing, and basically those are fixed points on the Earth that transmit signals that basically are waypoints, okay, across the country. So you can navigate as a commercial military, or as a military pilot. You can navigate by PAC-AN, you can navigate by compass, you can navigate with GPS. And then and then the last thing is called internal navigation system, which is a gyroscopic device that uses the Earth itself as its waypoint. But doesn't rely on celestial observations or anything like that. It just knows where you are relative to fixed.
Hi. So this is Solar System Scope, and we can see this is the actual time and planet where we're at right now with our universe. I'd like to show you a couple things where we're at and where these objects actually are. As I said before, so if you click on this little Earth, click on here, and then we can see the different views. And most of these were over Italy and Germany. And we can see when we click on the scope here, when I said that we were looking at the shadows to the northwest, that would have been right about here. And at this time, so everything I'm doing is all happened within 30 minutes. It is 6:40 Pacific time. So I'll leave a link in the description because it's happening now. And so the southeast is where this whole thing's going as it settles down, I think. Just about in here somewhere. It's probably, again, this is our horizon. This is our Earth's ecliptic plane. Through the plasma field, which is going to stop the Earth, pole shift. The rich people are going to hide in their cities, which a lot of Christians believe that this is going to be a six-seal judgment, and I'm one of them. And how can I stay calm? Because the world is not falling apart. Everything is falling into place, just the way God told you it was. So I wanted to show you one other planetary alignment that I think is important. And, I'm just looking at the elections, predictive programming, Neptune, the signs. I look at Bible prophecies where I get these alignments. And one alignment that I find very interesting is the Sun, Moon, Earth, Neptune in the Aquarius on August 31st. I've heard this date before, this alignment with Neptune, because it's a water planet. Like in the days of Noah, I think they had an ancient flood. When the water planet is in alignment with Aquarius, this is like a time clock.
People were confirmed dead and 13 others remain missing after heavy rain caused flash floods and landslides in East China's Jiangxi province, South China's Hunan, Guizhou, Guangdong provinces, and Guangxi Autonomous Region. According to the local government, as of 6 p.m. on Wednesday, floods had left 3 people dead in Jiangxi. So far, 21,000 people in the province have been relocated, and another 10,000 people are in dire need of assistance. In Hunan, continuous rain resulted in swollen rivers, landslides, and mud rock flows. The Provincial Flood Control and Drought Relief Headquarters said on Wednesday that 3 people died in Hengshan County. Meanwhile, 4 others were reported missing. About 530 houses collapsed and nearly 12,000 people were evacuated. In Guangxi, 1 person was killed when a house collapsed in torrential rain. 2 were swept away by floods, while another was buried by a landslide. The rain and ensuing disasters also destroyed over 700 houses, ruined more than 20,000 hectares of crops, and 4...
begin in Ethiopia, where the death toll from a landslide at a rubbish dump in the capital has risen to more than 60, and there are fears it may still go up. Rescue officials are still searching for dozens of bodies trapped under the kosher landfill. CGTN's Girum Challa has this update from Addis Ababa.
Dozens of makeshift homes are buried under the mountain of garbage behind me. People have been dumping their rubbish here for decades. It's believed around 150 people were here when the landslide took place on Saturday night. Dozens of people are buried under tons of waste, as you can see behind me there. People had been making a living by picking through the rubbish dump for useful items. Some had even made permanent homes for themselves around here. It's believed children are among the dead. Search and rescue operations continue here, but rescue workers face a tough task. Bulldozers have to carefully remove the rubbish over there. The heavy machinery could cause further slides as well. For now, they operate in the hope of finding survivors.
Tornado is touching down in southwest Florida. This happened overnight, and this was the scene in Punta Gorda, where an EF1 tornado touched down on Aspen Road East. The storm going through one family's yard, destroying their barn, sending chunks of metal flying, even cutting their horses loose.
A lot of memories of this barn. Had it ever since I was 13. Now it's gone.
Went out with him, and the other horses were loose, running around, and it's very dark.
Well, the storm also flipping the family's truck over on its head. All the family's animals are expected to be okay, though one duck was lost. The family says they're working to clean up the mess and rebuild.
China's National Observatory has raised its orange alert for frozen roads in the country's western Tibet autonomous region. A snowstorm and frigid temperatures have led to road and highway closures. A blizzard swept the Shikaze, Ali, and Shannan areas on Friday and Saturday. Snow drifts were 30 to 50 centimeters deep in the urban areas of several counties in Shikaze. The power supply in downtown Jilong was also temporarily cut down. Local authorities are clearing the roads, so they also distributed food and livestock feed in advance to help villagers brace for the snowstorm.
Maurice Christine, good evening. It is low tide here, but high water on the Great South Bay, where streets flooded and folks were forced to stay inside.
Cars caught in salt water, a big problem. The rainy, wintry mix melted, and even several hours after noon's high tide here on Suffolk's South Shore, streets in low-lying areas were impassable.
All eyes are on that massive storm. Take a live look at Wrigley Field in Chicago. The snow starting to come down right now. The roads messy there this morning. They're bracing for up to half a foot of snow today.
Highway havoc in the Midwest, a late winter storm slamming millions from Iowa to Minnesota.
Awful. I didn't expect it to get this bad. It's intense. So crazy.
Plummeting temperatures, freezing freeways, sending cars sliding off the road and into each other. The treacherous conditions causing this 24-car pileup outside of Minneapolis. Wind and waves from Lake Ontario, along with freezing temperatures, engulf this New York house in ice. Surprisingly, this isn't out of the ordinary. Delays in the Twin Cities as airlines scrambled to de-ice planes stuck on the tarmac. A frigid blast blowing across the region overnight, dumping close to 10 inches of snow from the Dakotas to Iowa. Another 24 inches expected in some areas by Wednesday. But merciless sub-freezing temperatures, disastrous near Detroit. 65,000 people in the area still without power. And officials now say carbon monoxide poisoning from generators have left 2 people dead. In this northern Detroit home, a mother and her 2 young children hospitalized. This morning, across the Northeast, 60 million residents are bracing for the winter wallop as it barrels.
Now to Peru and those tragic mudslides. The death toll rising there following intense rains that have left thousands homeless. But some heroic rescues giving many hope. Here's ABC's Marcy Gonzalez.
In the fast-moving, muddy water and piles of dangerous debris, a woman almost washed away. As she tries to free herself, her hair seemingly gets stuck before she finally pulls herself to safety. One of many lives narrowly spared from Peru's raging flooding and mudslides that officials say have killed more than 70 people so far this year and left more than 70,000 people homeless. Tonight, as intense downpours overwhelm towns and send rivers pouring over their banks, desperate rescues are underway. Near the normally dry capital city of Lima, dozens of people crowd onto rooftops above washed-out streets. Zip lines being used to bring families and pets over fast-rising water. Others are forming human chains to get to dry ground. Tonight, half of the country is declared a state of emergency. Officials say this is the worst flooding in Peru in nearly 2 decades, with much more rain still expected.
آمبولانس بود ماشینه.
Started taking everything up. My trash cans were flying everywhere. My tent was flying everywhere. I was kind of hanging on it, like almost like a monkey in a sense, trying to hold everything down.
There is one video taken by Louisiana resident Danny Garceau on April the 1st. The video has garnered a great deal of attention. I would say that this is one of the most convincing captures of the star system that I have analyzed over the years. The brown dwarf in a very rare appearance as it orbits our sun in retrograde fashion. And there was also a series of images taken on March 16th and 17th, which are equally incredible, showing the presence of a celestial body. These images are posted on our Facebook page and can be viewed close up. And be sure to follow our page for daily updates on the Planet X Nibiru system. Leave a comment or a message, and as a source to share your images and videos.
4th, Tuesday, 9 o'clock Mountain Time, 2017. What we're looking at is the Gulf of Mexico rainbow loop is what they call this. And you can still see a persistent disturbance down here in the Florida Panhandle. It's slowly moved across Louisiana, southern Mississippi, Alabama, and it's been hitting Florida and Georgia the past couple of days. And it was so intense in Georgia yesterday that they've gone ahead and declared ahead of tomorrow's storms, because it's predicted to cause a lot of damage and destruction in southwestern Georgia tomorrow, that they've declared a state of emergency right here in Albany, or actually south of Albany, in Dougherty County. A full-blown state of emergency in Dougherty County ahead of the severe weather, and it hasn't even happened yet. And it's because the weather that they got yesterday was so bad, so strong, so intense, that they're not taking any chances. Here's what the local news had to say about it right here. And you can see the maps of what they're predicting for tomorrow. They are in a moderate to high tornado path right through here, and Albany's right in the middle of it. Check it out. Here's what they've got to say.
State of emergency has been declared for Dougherty County ahead of tomorrow's storm.
The National Weather Service shows Dougherty County could possibly see strong, long-track tornadoes with destructive wind gusts as high as 70 miles per hour. Now, these weather events could happen throughout the day tomorrow.
And we want to tell you more on the details on what exactly a disaster declaration means. Number one, the county emergency operations plans will be activated. Number two, the emergency operations ordinances that Dougherty County commissioners adopted will be operative.
It's getting just off the charts. Everywhere you look around the globe, there's some sort of wild weather going on. If it's not giant hail, it's strong winds, straight line winds, dust storms, tornadoes, floods, landslides, mudslides. It just goes on and on and on, and it doesn't stop. It only seems to intensify. So there's already a state of emergency in place in Dougherty County, which is south of Albany, Georgia, right here, for tomorrow, and the storms haven't even hit yet, but they're brewing. And they know it. And based off of what it did yesterday, they're not taking any chances.
Another sign that this is in play. Record snow, blizzards. Newfoundland, eastern Canada, getting over 120 centimeters of snow. And for those of you in the U.S., 2.5 centimeters equals 1 inch. A couple images for you here. Snow up to the rooftops of homes. Now in Canada, when it's reported in the news as an unbelievable amount of snow, and this is in Gander, which also had record snows 2 years ago. Seems to be a trend in that area. Here's the actual depth of some of the snow on top of the cars. And all of you hearing about the melting sea ice. Oh, it's going to melt in and we'll use all the Northwest Passage, and it's definitely disappearing, the sea ice, or so you've been told. Atlantic Ferry, stuck in sea ice off Cape Breton. This off the IceAgeNow.info newsfeed. Nova Scotia Ferry, stuck. They're not really sure when they can get it out. They're sending an icebreaker right now to try to escort it out of this slush pack ice. Image here for you of the escort ship trying to break it free right now and cut a channel through there. Cape Breton here on the map for you, far eastern Maritimes. Bit north of Halifax, Nova Scotia. Satellite image for you here. If truly all the sea ice was melting, you think further south latitudes would be the first place that it would disappear, not in the Arctic Circle, which they keep claiming. How can there be so much sea ice this far south if all the ice is disappearing in the north? How can there still be ice further south? This is just simple, commonsensical stuff.
Saw that. Oh! Where's my safety glasses? Ah! Yeah. Man, those came out of nowhere. Sucker that got me. Big Daddy. Well guys, got 3 tornadoes today. It's a beautiful lightning, and destroyed another window with hail, but more important news, we lost 3 storm chasers today. Kelly Williamson, Randy, the Storm Wranglers, were in an accident with another storm chaser named Corbin from Arizona, I believe. I didn't know him, but Kelly and I were friends, and we used to hang out and underneath the storms and talk about everything except the storms. I remember being in New Mexico with him last year, and we were looking for arrowheads and didn't find any, but we talked about getting barbecue and beer all the times, but we kept missing each other. Just last 2 days ago in Oklahoma, he and I got to hang out for a good 20-30 minutes before getting all the funnel clouds, and he was a hard worker, and he was a good storm chaser. He was just a good old boy, down-to-earth guy, and that's what made the Storm Wranglers TV show so good, and I'll miss him. And my deepest condolences go out to the families of all of them. Yeah, so I don't know what else to say, but rest in peace, guys.